Good morning. Welcome to Business Buzz. Today we will be discussing whether there's a place for empathy in managing a business. My guest today is Tanvir Nasir, who hails from Montreal, Canada, and will definitely be in the hot seat today. Tanvir is a talented business coach whose business blogs caught my eye because of his unique understanding of the place empathy and other soft skills have in contributing to the success of a company. In other words, using women's skills. Tanvir, I hope you'll keep that hot seat warm for a brief time so that I can ask our listeners to try to put themselves in my shoes while I share with them a true story. Then I will turn the mic over to you and ask you to weigh in on how you think a man would have handled the same situation I faced. Several years ago, I had a company, a large company, that I bought, and I tried to turn it around. It was a struggling company, and it was losing money by the boatloads for about 3 years, and I just could not fix it. And sometimes you just can't fix a broken company. It was in New Jersey, and it was a large plant. It had been there for 20 years, and the employees that I inherited were also there for probably most of them 20 years. So I started looking for a buyer. I found one in Michigan, and I realized that I would have to close this plant down. And I'd never done that before, and I really felt badly about it. I understood there were going to be 200 workers that were going to be on the street without a job after many years of working in this plant. It bothered me to no end. I knew that the traditional method of sending out pink slips was definitely not the way to go. My natural instincts were telling me, let me call a meeting, let me get all the employees shift by shift, there were 2 shifts, in the cafeteria, let them huddle around, I'll stand in the middle, they'll go in the cafeteria and sit down, and I will tell them as much as I thought I should tell them about the business, how I tried to save it, how much money I lost, why I couldn't save it, and what was happening. So I did that. I called the first shift in. They all came up. I could see in their faces they were worried. They understood, because I'd never done that before, that this was something really serious. I thought that having been in this business and being what I considered a tough professional, that I'd be able to handle my discussion with them very professionally and just without a lot of emotion. So I started telling them the story, and I looked around, and I saw the faces of some of these employees that I knew firsthand and had worked with that were supervisors or maybe even line workers in the plant. And I saw the expression on their faces, and I saw the worry and the sadness. And I started to cry. I couldn't help it. Tears just filled my eyes, and they kept coming down until I finished. And I had never been a crier. I never shed a tear in any of my companies ever until this day. And it surprised me. But I realized that my emotions were so strong about this particular situation that I just couldn't hide them. I was worried because I thought that the employees would really be mad at me and angry, and they would mock me. But as I dried my tears and tried to regain my composure, one of the workers shouted out, "Ma'am, you're not so tough." And the rest of the workers applauded and laughed warmly in appreciation. It was a very, very telling moment for me. What I learned is that there are times in your business experience when compassion and empathy take over naturally, and they expose the truth, that you care, that you're human, that the lives of other people are just as important as yours. And when that happens, that moment is remembered by everyone who witnesses it. So what did I learn from that experience? It's something that haunts me to this day, is that when you're able to identify with and understand someone else's feelings, it is a rare gift that most women possess, empathy. And I believe it's indispensable in sound business leadership. Tanvir, I'd now like to turn that hot seat over to you and leave you with the same situation and ask you, how do you think a man would handle closing a plant under the same circumstances that I described?
Well, I don't think we have to look very hard and long to find that out. I mean, given the current economy, we've seen a number of layoffs, a number of closures, and so forth. We probably know people who've experienced this at one point in their time or another. And given how 90% of the companies are still run by men, we see that it's pretty much done as what we'll call, quote unquote, a business decision. In other words, I got $50 million on the budget that I have to cut. Where am I going to cut it? And the first place it always goes is employees. And it's a problem that's now been solved. And so there's no concern over the impact on the employees because, as the old adage we love to pass around is, it's nothing personal. It's just business. So I don't think men at all would, I would say most men, I like to think it's changing now, but I think for the longest while it's really always been approached as a business decision. We're not doing this to you personally. We're doing this because it's in the best interest of this organization.
Well, I understand the feeling because when you are a business owner, you have to try to be very, very direct and understanding of your position as a company. But what I've seen in my studies and in how I ran my companies, women think about it completely different. The employees are not just widgets. They actually are human beings who have their own ideas and their own identity. And because women look at it as their employees to them are family in a attenuated way. They're people that they need to take care of if they can. And when they can't take care of them, it's very distressing to them. And all of the studies that I've read say that most women in business have the same philosophy that I do. So I understand that men look at it as a balance sheet and say, well, we got to cut these because this is the way I need to make money and I got to cut the bottom line and make profits for my shareholders. But there is a balance here, and I don't think that men strike that balance. Do you think that women can play a different role in trying to set a new standard that maybe men might be persuaded to follow? And do you see men's views about empathy changing at all?
I do, because there's been a number of studies that have been come out last year that have shown the value of empathy. I think before, like you were saying, empathy is often regarded as looking after the well-being of your employees. And again, it's hard to rationalize decisions being made to shareholders who are looking for a higher dividend that we have to do this for the well-being of our employees, unless which we now can do, provide empirical evidence that it actually benefits the organization. A study was done last year in the UK, which found that employees who worked under a female CEO had a higher level of trust, and this is both men and women employees, than those who worked under a male CEO. And when they crunched through the numbers, they found the reason for the higher level of trust for women CEOs was because the women CEOs were more aware of the day-to-day challenges that their employees face than the male CEOs did. So they understood how the decisions they made would impact their employees' ability to do their jobs. In other words, they were demonstrating empathy. And I don't think there's any business leader out there who can deny the value having a workforce that has a high level of trust and the leadership has on the ability of an organization to succeed. So I definitely think that this is somewhere where women leaders can definitely start demonstrating, tangible empirical evidence of how these traits are beneficial, not just for the employees in the sense of their contributions to the organization, but also for the bottom line.
Well, and I've got stories, and if someone wants to read my book, Briefcase Essentials, you'll see that I've got really some evidence that, in fact, if you buy in and sincerely take an interest in your employees, you absolutely will increase your bottom line significantly, so that whatever you invest in your employees, it always comes back to you, in my experience. Let me ask you, as a very well-known and very successful coach, business coach and entrepreneurial coach, can you teach empathy?
Well, you know what? The thing is, when it comes to empathy, we all actually, as humans, have it. We're all born with empathy. A lot of studies into neuroscience and child development have demonstrated that. The problem we're encountering is that as we grow up, we socially and through our educational systems, men tend to have it repressed out. And that's one of the reasons often. And I think there's also a little bit of an innate drive. If you consider the fact that if I'll give you a great example anyone can relate to. If you look at an example of when a husband and wife compare their days, the husband will say, this is what went on in his day. The wife will listen and, okay, she'll empathize with the situation. The wife will say, okay, yeah, I had a rough day as well. I had this client who was really difficult and such and so forth. More often than not, the male's response will be to say, well, you know what you could do, or you know what I suggest you do? And it's because for men, the initial reaction is when someone provides a problem, it's that they want someone wants their help to solve it. We don't get the empathy notion of sometimes what's needed in these moments is for people to just be heard. So it's there. What it is a matter of us getting reconnected with it. I had a client, in fact, is a good example of this, where he got his 360-degree feedback reviews. And one of the things that caught him off by guard was how a lot of his employees felt like he was aloof, he was indifferent, and he thought he was very much there for his employees. So we went through his reviews, and we discussed how he operated on a day-to-day basis. And, I'd ask him things like, well, when an employee comes to your office, and I would give him scenarios like, if they're coming to give you a report, do you just sit there and listen to them, or do you have to also answer your emails or their phone calls coming in? Do you have like a really busy day like that? And he'd say, well, yeah, it's really busy, so yes, I do have to fire out emails while they were giving me the reports because that way I can stay on top of stuff. I said, okay. And I said, and, if someone were to come and say they got this problem and so forth, do you try to help them solve the problem, or you just let them talk about it? And he says, well, no, I try to help them solve it and so forth. And so then after we went through this exercise, I pointed out to him how this is where you're going wrong. And it was like, wait a minute, what do you mean I'm doing wrong? And I said, for empathy, there's 3 steps you need to follow to really demonstrate. The first one is to improve your awareness of the people who are communicating with you. And by that I mean not just what they're saying, but their nonverbal cues. And you also have to be self-aware of your own responses, how your responses color their reactions and what they're going to tell you. And I said, once you get that awareness of what they're saying to you, the second thing you need to do is develop an understanding. Why is it that they're telling me this? What is it that they are trying to relate to me? What is the information they're trying to impart? And then once you have that in place, the third step is then to provide them with the support they need. So in some cases, employees will come to you to tell you problems. They're not telling it to you because they want you to fix it for them. They're just trying to tell you to advise you of the challenges they're facing. So that way, when things don't go right, you're aware of it, and you can understand the difficulties they're having, and you can therefore relate to them. So once you do those 3 things, you'll have a better response. Besides which, just as general as a leader, it's good advice not to just always jump in and try to solve problems for your employees. It's better to show them you trust them to solve their own problems, and they can do it on their own. And your goal is really just to provide them with the support and the resources to accomplish that. So I gave him those tools, and I said to him also, bear in mind, it's going to take time because we're talking about a behavioral shift. And a behavioral shift doesn't happen overnight. It'll take time. And he's had some success. He's had moments where he did the whole 3 steps, and he said the reaction I got was great. And he's now starting to see when he slips up. So he's starting to get there. So it can be, the behavior of demonstrating empathy can certainly be taught, but having empathy, I think it's something we all innately have. The research shows that we're all soft-wired for empathy. I just think socially and education-wise, we've been conditioned as males to not be as expressive about it as women are.
So our task as women in the business world is to try to work with the males that we see and try to teach them a little bit at a time how this particular skill set evolves, because otherwise I just don't see any hope for it changing in corporate America, and it really needs to change. My definition of empathy from a woman's point of view is the ability to understand the feelings of those who work with you and put yourself in their shoes by considering how your actions will affect them. Can you show me an example where you've seen men in the workplace in a leadership role refuse to show empathy, where they think they need to go the opposite way? Because that's what it seems like to me in many situations, where they want to come up and deliver a completely monotone, no emotion, no recognition of anybody, just get the information out. And that's my pink slip scenario, which I see so often.
Yeah, I think that's, in fact, a situation that everybody faces in their workplace. I'll give you a good example of one where one company I was working with a number of years ago, we went through a process where we were bought out by a bigger company, small fish getting swallowed by the big fish. And so understandably there was a lot of concern over, if there are going to be any layoffs, is there going to be any cutbacks in the workforce and so forth. And everyone was reassured, no, this is just them wanting to add another division to their thing. And, of course, within a few months there were the layoffs. But the layoffs, the way they were handled, was really done in a very disheartening fashion, where basically for example, one of the directors, okay, this is not just an underling, this is one of the senior management members, was called into the office of the president. He came out, and I was really good friends with him. He came to my office, and he said to me, "I've just been let go." And I'm like, "What do you mean you've just been let go?" He says, "I've just got my pink slip." And I'm like, "You're higher up than I am. How could they let you go?" He says, "Well, apparently they did." And within moments after he's talking to me, an email appeared right on my screen from the president saying how this guy had decided to leave the company for whatever, and we wish him the best of luck and so forth. And he was standing there right next to me while I was reading it and going, "Well, apparently you left of your own volition." And so this poor guy had to walk around while he was getting ready his stuff, everyone already knowing that he was leaving. And everyone could tell from his reactions and the fact that he was acting like business as usual, this wasn't the case of an individual leaving of their own accord. So here's an example of someone who's just doing it to placate, the head office in another city, and doing it in a fashion that doesn't show any respect for what this individual will be going through. Being a highly placed individual in this organization, having a lot of people under his charge, and having to have all these people as he's walking out the door looking at him as he leaves. Again, most people are going to say, "Well, that's business. That's how we do it," right? But that's not the way we have to do it. I could tell you the impact it had on the workforce was probably more debilitating than the actual letting go of this individual.
Well, and I say in whatever you do when you deal with individuals and you have the control over hiring them and firing them, it is never the way to do it, not just not the way to do it. It is never the way to take an employee and demean them publicly and humiliate them, because in many situations they will come back and be very angry at you, and they have good reason because you've humiliated them. When I used to have to terminate individual employees for their work ethic or the performance of their job, I would always wait until the end of the day when most of the employees had left, and I would ask them to stay a little later so that there wouldn't be any other employees around to have to deal with their expression and their anger or whatever that may be, and so that I would give them a little bit of an opportunity to be by themselves. And I would sit with them for sometimes up to 2 or 3 hours discussing with them why I felt that they had to leave, that they just couldn't fill the position I was looking for. And that would have not been the first time they ever heard that, because my policy always was when someone wasn't performing the way I wanted them to, they always had notice from me exactly what they needed to do to change it. And I would keep up with it so that it wasn't like taking a brick and whacking them over the head. By the time they came into the office after hours, they knew that they had not changed what they needed to change in order to be successful. So there were no surprises, and there was no dehumiliation. And ironically, most of those, I would say almost all of the people that I did that and that were in the executive positions, they may not have been a vice president, but they were a supervisor or somebody important in the company, they kept in touch with me. And they sent me emails, and they called me, and they still send me Christmas cards. So I think what it says, Tanvir, is that there is a real right way to do this and a right way to handle human beings and individuals and a wrong way. And I believe that women, because of their skill sets and because of their ability to put themselves in somebody else's shoes and say, I don't want to be treated that way, so why would I treat them that way? That they are able to do this in a very professional way, but also a very human way. And my goal is to try to get other men and coaches like you to be able to root this home and make this happen, because it has to happen. We talk a lot today in politics about civility. Well, this is civility. You need to be civil to your people. You cannot mistreat anyone, because otherwise you have to expect it. At some point in time, you're going to get treated the same way. And I'm beating a drum, I know, but that drum is important, because I think most of the changes in the workplace for women will actually happen if empathy finds its own place. And I have one more question for you. I'd love to keep this dialogue going. This could be a 10-hour conversation. We could go nonstop. That would be my choice. So somebody put a white flag up. But I have one last question that is one I think is important for today, and I'd love for you to come back, because you have so many interesting ideas and concepts and articles, and there's no end to what we can talk about, and I hope you will come back. But for today, I'd like you to try to answer this last question, and that is, in corporate America, from my vantage point, it seems that male-dominated organizations rarely show any signs of empathy or empathetic actions toward their employees, unless the company's CEO is a woman, surprisingly. And then there are changes. It is visible. When Carly Fiorino took over Hewlett-Packard, there were changes. There were some people changes that were significant. Probably not enough, but there were some. How do you think change will come, or is empathy in corporate America dead on arrival until there's many more female owners and CEOs than there are males?
I think change is coming, because more as a response of the social change. The one thing I find interesting is how there's a lot of open admissions now that we've been pretty much working from an industrial age vantage point, that employees are basically there to tighten wrenches, tighten those nuts. And we're starting to really, truly appreciate that we're now in a knowledge-based industry, in a knowledge-based economy, where it's a matter of tapping into the talents, the innate abilities of our employees to use that information to give companies a competitive advantage. So I do think the change is coming, but it's going to be a part reflected on the social change. If we look at men as parents, for example, in today as compared to like 20, 30 years ago, there is a definitive change in how much more involved they are. It's not ideal. I don't think we're at 50-50. I still think we have a ways to go, but it's happening, and I think that those changes are going to affect the boys who will grow up to be men, who will go into the workforce, and how they interact with women, how they perceive the attributes women bring into the workplace, and its place in the workforce. And I do think that change is going to happen. Will the presence of more women help it? Clearly, the research shows it does. I mean, there's even research showing how having more women in senior positions alongside men helps companies to become more innovative. And not surprising when you think about how men and women approach problems from different vantage points. So I do think, given so many of the demographics and social changes that are already underway, businesses are going to have to change. I think one of the reasons we're seeing so much disconnect and distrust with businesses today is because it's no longer reflecting our society right now. And organizations and businesses, first and foremost, have to serve the society that they occupy. I think that's one of the reasons why everyone got so outraged over the bailouts, was because we were serving the organizations rather than the organizations serving society. So I do believe the change will be coming. Will it happen to the degree and at the pace we want it to? Maybe not, but I do believe if enough people keep drawing attention to it, doing research proving the benefits of empathy in the workplace, it will come around.
Well, I'm going to count on you to keep beating the drum too, Dan Veer.
Count on it.
Okay.
Sure.
And I think that before you sign off, what I'd like you to do is give the listeners an opportunity to figure out how to find you and how to follow you, as I have done, because I've found that reading your articles has given me a tremendous insight into things that I never thought about from a different perspective. And I want you to come back and let's do innovation about women, because I've got some ideas, and come back when you've got some good statistics and information, and let's talk about how women as innovators can really energize the economy that we're looking at.
Sure, I'd love that. For your listeners who'd like to connect with me and read some of my writings on leadership and workplace interactions, you can find my blog. It's on my website at tanveernasir.com. Don't worry, I'm going to spell it. It's TANVEERNASEER.com. That's one word. You can also contact me through my website. And I'm looking forward to coming back on your show, Susan, and I had a great time.
Great, and I did too, and I learned a lot, and I also was able to have somebody who's got a perspective that's very open-minded and also has the opportunity to be able to pass this information on to business leaders and keep this energy going. And that's really what my goal is to keep this momentum going. We need to have more momentum for women to try to get some of their ideas into the workplace and have them stick. Well, that's our show for today. If you have any comments or questions, you can email them to me, and if I use your comment or question on the air, I will send you an autographed copy of my book, Briefcase Essentials. On my next show, I will feature 2 executive coaches and ask them this one question: are executive coaches a crutch or one salvation? So until next time, remember, I've been there, done that, and now it's your turn.